r/askreddit. People who have been to a wedding where someone objected to the marriage, what was their reason? I wasn't there, but an old friend told me about a wedding he attended years ago. When it came time for the objection part, a voice in the back yells, "She sucked my dick like 30 minutes ago." Bride bursts into tears. Groom just walks away. That blows. I thought the objection part doesn't really happen in real weddings. Went to a wedding. Everything seems to be going well. Groom felt up the 18-year-old niece. Mob finds out while bride and groom are at altar and things went to shit pretty soon after. That's a big ol' yikes. How did she find out in the ceremony? Groom felt up the 18-year-old niece. The one day to maintain one's safe control and discipline, and he manages to mess up that badly? That's a good reason to cut ties with one's partner for. Went to a wedding. Guy objected and said, "If you'll marry, I'll lose my drinking buddy." Oh, that's kinda sad. Did they marry? The bride was banging this dude at the time of her marriage, not the groom BTW, and then someone ended up objecting. The guy she was fucking, and said, "She has been fucking me, that cow, and she is better off with me." The groom dumped her after that, and then everyone in my province knows her, so no one wants her, so she moved province. Her breakdown at the wedding was priceless. He called her a cow and still said he wanted her? Hahaha. I was at the one wedding where the bride had only known the groom for what seemed like a day. They didn't seem like a good match. She was a good few feet taller than him, and it looked like it wouldn't work. Anyway, they're at the altar. The priest says his line and this dude and his mate comes running and shouting. He objects and confesses his love to the bride. The groom's buddies get a bit physical and a fight breaks out. Long story short, groom gets eaten by a dragon and the bride turns into an ogre and they live in a swamp now with their 3 kids, so I guess it all worked out for them. You got me good. At my half-sister's wedding, when they got to the objection part, of her mother, same dad different mum, leant across to another family member and whispered, "Yeah, he isn't good enough for her." The offerant stopped the wedding and asked her to speak up, saying it's a legal part to the wedding and if she has an objection then please state it loud enough to hear. Sister's mum laughed it off and sat down red-faced, while I glared evils into the back of this woman's head. My sister is awesome and the gush with makes her super happy. Bonus awkward points. In his speech he thanked sister's mother for accepting him onto the family and how happy he was to have another mum. Both his parents have died. Oof from me. Edit. Sorry for cliffhanger. A guy had been molesting some of the girls from the school where he was the after-school activity program director. The bride has a daughter herself and knew about some of the allegations but decided to marry him anyway, out of state. Well, some of us were still invited and unbeknownst to her a woman barges in cussing up a storm because her daughter is one of the ones that he molested really bad and she's in counseling because of it and he got off free. Was a full out brawl. Intruder lady and a few others were arrested and that was the end of that wedding. She ran off somewhere and I guess cried for the remainder of the evening and her family asked everyone to leave. She still married him but eloped somewhere private and posted pictures on Facebook. Did she still marry him after that? Fun fact, in France the religious ceremony has no value, and the legal wedding is performed in a short ceremony by the mayor, typically the same day, in the morning, then everyone rushes to the religious one. This ceremony is public, and as such the doors must be opened so that anyone with a valid legal motive can interrupt. Sneakily closing the doors can get the marriage annulled. This is similar to the rule in the UK, and possibly elsewhere, too, where any marriage in a church has to be open to the public, because any official service has to be public. Not quite objected, but I went to a wedding where the bride got smashed before the ceremony and couldn't say her vows, had to go have a nap and miss the reception. It's very weird to me how drunk people will get at their own wedding. I would want to remember every moment of my expensive ass party. The wife objected because she had shorty found out her soon-to-be husband had been sleeping with her sister for the past 8 years despite the two of them having 2 kids. Damn, that's even worse. What kind of sister does that? We didn't object but it was hard to keep our mouths shut at my aunt's wedding. She'd had a hard life. Her 2 daughters were mentally disabled to the point where they had to live in a care facility full-time. They'll never progress beyond toddlerhood but are in their 30s. Her first husband abused the girls and then killed himself. The only bright side was that he left her millions in real estate. Her second serious partner left her, and she was lonely as hell. She lectured and was a smart lady, with a PhD, but somehow fell for this con man. He's a bad dude. He was after her money, which was supposed to be for the future care of the girls. He wasn't allowed back in several countries because he had conned people out of so much money, and there was something very wrong with him mentally. He claimed to be able to cure cancer and took cancer patients' money and would stay in hotels then leave without paying. He'd steal credit cards from people, etc. Anyhow, we were invited to the wedding. We'd found out about his issues, but he had convinced my aunt that it was all lies and the world was against him. We struggled so hard to be there for her that day, but we needed her to know that we were on her side, as he had already started to poison her mind with allegations that her family weren't good for her. But soon he had her totally under his control and none of us were allowed to speak to her. We were pretty worried, but couldn't do anything. Eventually, after about 5 years, he blew through most of her money. They did IVF and had a son, who is now 8. Her husband left when the money was gone, and she got a bit wise to his lies. So now she's nearly 60, raising a child, and trying to rebuild bridges with her family and friends. Kinda wish we had objected at the wedding, but she was set on her path, and other people like her parents had told her all the bad stuff they had found out about her husband, and it hadn't stopped her. Figured all we could do was be there for her. You shouldn't blame yourself for not objecting at the wedding. That probably would have only driven you further apart. I hope she's doing better now. At my cousin bride's wedding, one of the groomsmen spent the entire ceremony facing the audience, with his back to the bride. He felt that my cousin was an overly judgmental succubus who would nag and belittle him. He was absolutely right. He shouldn't have participated in the ceremony then. His function as groomsman was to stand in support of the marriage. If he had a problem with it, he should have told the groom he couldn't participate in the wedding. That move seems more for him and his ego. This happened a couple of years ago. A work social friend of mine was getting married to a guy she had previously dated, but broke off the relationship cause one night he was drunk and tried to strangle her. They were apart for a couple of years. He supposedly cleaned up, and then started dating again. One night, we three were at a bar, and my friend has to go to the restroom. As soon as she leaves the table, he nudges my elbow and tells me how loose her pussy is, and that it's wrecked and shit. I'm a guy. I told him, she loves you, man. Don't talk about my friend like that. It's disrespectful, and it'll end with me kicking your ass. He tells me, fuck you. My friend comes back to the table and realizes there's enough tension to cut with a knife. I gave my friend a kiss on the cheek and called it a night. She called me later that evening and asked what happened. I gave it to her straight. I could hear her crying on the other end. She kept on dating this toxic piece of shit. A few months later, the wedding announcements were sent. I was just like, oh fuck. One night, I'm out on a date, who becomes my future wife, at a nice Italian restaurant, when I see Mr. Toxic sitting at the bar, kissing the neck of some woman who isn't my friend. This was about a week and a half before the wedding. I whip out the phone and start filming. I got a good shot of him grabbing this lady's breast and putting his hand up her skirt, with her slapping his hand off. My future wife is like, WTF are you doing? I quietly explained the situation. After I got enough evidence, he sees me, comes over to the table and asks me what I'm doing there. I tell him that I'm doing what people do when they go to a restaurant. He asked me how long I was there. I said that we were just seated. He's like, okay, well I was just getting a drink and I'm on my way home. I told him to drive safely. He walks out. The woman at the bar gets this confused look on her face and then runs after him. After a life-changing fabulous date, besides the previous shit, I go over to my friend's house. Mr. Toxic's car isn't there. I show my friend the video, tell her that I shot it hours ago, and she breaks down into a crying mess. I ask the question, you're not going to go through with the wedding, are you? She tells me that all the reservations have been made, the church booked, the caterers paid, the photographer paid, yada yada. I'm like, who gives a shit? No one wanted to see her married to a cheater. She says she doesn't want to marry him, but she's obligated. I'm good friends with her father. He's a hulking 6 feet 4 inches 300 pounds. Holly rider with a handlebar mustache. I pay him a visit. I show him the video. He turns red. Veins start showing up on his forehead. His hands start opening and closing in clenches. He says, "Motherfucker." I explain to him how his daughter feels obligated. He gives me a bear hug that just about breaks my back. He lets me go. I see he's crying profusely. He asks me if I could send him the video. I'm like, of course. The next day my friend's dad calls me up and tells me that the wedding is going to now be a dodging a bullet ceremony with maybe an ass kicking for the finale. I told him that I would be more than happy to attend. My friend called me up and thanked me. She said that her dad dropped by and told her that he would not allow her to marry him. It was a load off her back. So we went over Mr. Toxic's guest list. No family, just friends. Perfect. The day of the ceremony, Dad had a large flat screen TV plugged in on the dais. The preacher was warned, I guess, cause Dad walked his daughter down the aisle, and when they got to the end, the preacher turned around and walked out. Mr. Toxic didn't notice, but he reached out for my friend's hand and her dad loudly said, "No fucking way in this universe." Then the flat screen with surround sound came on. There it was for everyone to see, with my future wife saying, "WTF are you doing?" and my whole explanation afterwards. Mr. Toxic was pasty white and sweating profusely. He did the perp walk down the center aisle, caught my eye with me giving him the finger too. I heard a dude say, "No fucking way." Mr. Toxic exits and Dad says, "Let's party." That was it. We had a great night. There were a couple times that my friend broke down crying, but overall she danced her ass off and laughed a lot. About 6 months later, she met the man of her dreams. Just a really fantastic guy. The wedding is this September. Slightly unrelated, but I think I read somewhere on Reddit that the objection part of the ceremony was never meant to be about "she should be with me" instead, or "you'll never be as happy with her as you were with me." Its inclusion is so if anyone knows of a legal reason that the marriage cannot be valid, one of them is already married, the bride isn't a virgin, bride and groom are siblings, etc. They have the opportunity to say so before the marriage is allowed and thus prevent any martial sins from taking place. Edit. Yes, obviously it is not currently illegal for non-virgins to marry. The custom was started centuries ago and was based on biblical and civil law. I agree that it's about raising legal objections rather than the dramatic device that we see in the movies, but I need to ask, in what jurisdictions is it illegal to get married if you are not a virgin? These days, I think that's going to be problematic for quite a few marriages. I was at a friend's wedding when his mother got up during the vows and said objection. Everyone stared at her in confusion while she stood there staring at his soon-to-be wife. His mother then proceeded to say, "I don't want my baby being with that rat Bass Road for the rest of his life." Everyone just kind of sat there looking confused and shocked. Her son, my friend, looked at her with a beet red face and ran out of the church we were in. I guess he felt the same way but didn't want to agree. Long story short, the bride ended up calling the wedding off and they broke up. Didn't get a slice of cake. Good times. When the post gets way more upvotes than comments because we all want to know but don't have and swear. One of my oldest friends is getting married this evening and I am one of her bridesmaids. It's going to take everything I have not to object. I and all of our friends, and seemingly even her parents, can't stand her husband to be. He's a massive tool and nobody can understand what she sees in him. He's not abusive or anything, just relentlessly triggered and annoying. He's like the sheltered homeschool kid who enters the real world at age 21 and tries to adapt by acting all street. He vapes indoors and makes rape jokes and quotes things even 4chan would find 3 edgy 5 me.